Hey, hello, and how are you? Welcome to another edition of Leading the Charge, the podcast. I'm your host, Dom Tibbetts, alongside my co-host, everybody's favorite unofficial family member, Brother Bill. We are coming to you 72 hours after the Buffalo Bills were eliminated by the Denver Broncos in the AFC divisional round of the playoffs. But it feels like, Bill, we will get to that in the second act of this podcast, because the most highly anticipated press conference in a long time happened today with not just general manager, newly promoted president of football operations, Brandon Beane, but Buffalo Bills owner, Terry Pegula. When we heard Terry was set to speak to reporters, when we got the email from Bills PR yesterday for a 10 a.m. presser, a lot of us all thought that Terry would either just make some opening remarks, pass the microphone along to Brandon Beane, either leave the stage, or awkwardly sit there next to him the entire time while Brandon fielded all the questions. Credit to Terry Pegula. He talked. Him and Beane talked for 54 minutes in a press conference that I can describe to Bills Mafia and fans who weren't in that room as maybe lowered tumultuous expectations than you maybe would have thought. But it still packed a bunch of content and a bunch of talking points, and it made a lot of us who are on TV and writers really hard, Bill, on where to start talking about this thing. Before we dive into the nitty and gritty and all these details about it, just you're watching this, listening to this as you're working today, just immediate thoughts on how that unraveled from your perspective.
I got into the shop probably like 9:55. And I knew it was starting at 10, but when I turned it on, I think Terry was just kind of talking and it was live for a little bit. So I was like setting up some things. So my first client was until 10:30. So got started pretty soon after that. And, you know, I thought it started okay. Like Terry kind of explains why he decided to fire Sean and talks about walking to the locker room and, you know, just the air being out of it and how dejected everyone looks. And Josh is crying and he can't even like look up at him, and just that he felt like we hit the proverbial playoff wall. And I was at that point, I was like nodding my head. I was like, you know what? That's a good reason. Like truly, because I know a lot of us had different emotions or feelings on how, you know, those post-game interviews came off with Dion crying and Josh crying. And for me, it was truly like, I felt like they have become one of us, like the fans that have been through droughts and lost Super Bowls. And it's like they have just succumbed to the fact that we are snake bitten and cursed. And like, it's just
they know the despair.
Yes. And they're expecting despair, just as we, you know, we get into these crucial moments. I remember five-ish years ago when this was all new blood and me feeling like, you know what, Josh is going to figure this out. Cole Beasley is going to get open on third down. Like I had that optimism, and now it's completely gone, where like the Brandon Cook play happens and I am like maniacally, or however you would say it, maniacally laughing to myself. Cause it's just like, of course, why else? Why else would this happen? How else would this happen? So for him to say like, he felt like that was that moment where he looks around and he sees all these dudes dejected and sad and broken and being like, this is time. Like this has been a good run, but it's time to turn the page. Like, I understand that. I respect it. I'm kind of felt the same way. But in my head, I'm also like, why is Brandon Beane still here then? Because he's just as guilty to me as Sean, if not more guilty the last 2 seasons. But then from that point on, it kind of, I was with him, and then I went from nodding my head yes to like shaking my head no as the Terry time had continued. So it definitely unraveled quickly.
I think going into that, the biggest thing, and this is from a lot of my friends and family and people that I know here in Buffalo who are fans who want to just get answers as to, you know, why was it just McDermott, to your point, Bill, and not Beane as well? And I think that's very valid, because I think a lot of people saw that news Monday and went through Tuesday, still yesterday, before Beane talked and said, I think the wrong guy got fired. And I actually credit to Matt Beauvais, my sports director. He asked Beane point blank that question of just about like, how do you face this fan base of knowing that a lot of this fan base feels like the wrong guy got fired? And being brought up the thing about pressure is privilege. And I understand that like nobody wants to win a Super Bowl more than me and all these other things that we'll get into. But that was a real thing that was addressed today. And I, to your point, I felt like after sitting in that room for 54 minutes and listening to everything that was said, it's clear why Brandon Beane still has his job in a sense, even though it might not seem morally correct, but it does make sense on a team basis to continually try to make the Buffalo Bills a Super Bowl contender like they should be next year with Josh Allen. It made sense why the decision had to be made. To your point too about Sean's conversation, Terry Pagula, and I know for those of you who are listening to this podcast and who listened to that press conference, you are going to go, "Oh my God, Dom, was that a dumpster fire?" It wasn't great. It wasn't great for Terry Pagula. But I think there are moments though where I will look back and I'll go, you know what? Terry's bluntness on certain topics and his ability and his interjecting and interrupting that he was doing at times served well, because I think a lot of times you get these executives, these GMs, front office guys who will put a lot of corporate jargon at you, and they're just a little bit too convoluted in the way they're trying to answer questions. Terry blatantly just coming out and being like, I looked in that locker room. I saw my franchise quarterback in despair, tears rolling down his eyes, the entire locker room blaming themselves because Josh Allen is taking the blame. I looked around that locker room and said, I saw this at 13 seconds. I saw this at wide right part 2. I saw this in Kansas City last year when that ball went through Kincaid's hands. I saw it when Stephon Diggs walked off the field when we almost had a lightning in the bottle shot of making the Super Bowl back in 2020 when they lost that first AFC championship. All those moments came together. You listen to that. And from somebody who's covered this team, and Bill, I'm sure you understand it too, as a fan, yeah, those moments add up. And you know what? It's not a knock to Sean McDermott for 7 straight playoffs, but to Terry's point, is success for you defined as 7 straight years of making the playoffs, but having no Super Bowls to show for it? That probably struck a chord with Bills fans because they want to have a villain in this case because they feel that McDermott got the short end of the stick. And I'm not saying that he didn't. There's an argument to be made there, but there's also a counter argument to that is that it ultimately came down to a lot of things coaching over the past 7 years that just felt like Sean McDermott wasn't going to be the guy that gets this team over the hill. And I thought that was addressed today. And that was arguably, I think, the biggest thing for fans to kind of alleviate themselves with and get over. And then the conversation kind of shifts to where does this organization go from here in terms of what does that power structure look like with Brandon Beane? He's now the president of football operations. So it's Terry Pagula, then to Brandon Beane, and then whoever this new head coach is now just under him. It's not a level playing field, him and the head coach. The new head coach of the Buffalo Bills will report to Brandon Beane, which is something that'll be totally new. I don't think it scares off any potential head coaching candidate. I think the ability to coach Josh Allen is going to be something that really drives a lot of these candidates that we're starting to see file in to like want to do this job and maybe put up a little bit of that, but it's certainly a factor. I'm just looking through the cheat sheet of all the topics that we're kind of getting into here. Going back to what we were talking about, Bill, did you hear the comment about Sean being fired because Brandon Beane said the roster, or Terry Pagula thought that the guys on the roster just weren't good enough to win games, and that Sean McDermott was not capable of getting them over the bump. But then the conversation, Bill, became, well, Sean McDermott didn't ask to put Darnell Savage in at safety in that situation. Sean McDermott didn't want Darius Slay and then lose Jamarcus Ingram out of that too. What was just, I guess, your perception on what was said in that context? I think that was another one where Beane had to unravel that situation because it seemed like all of a sudden the coaching woes and the general manager, the front office woes were getting put on Sean McDermott.
Yes, and that's what I've felt really since the news broke is I'm more on that side. And it's weird because if this happened 3 seasons ago, you like the season after I think we lost the Chiefs when Diggs dropped the ball, and then Tyler Bass misses the field goal and Diggs leaves that offseason. If you were to tell me at that point, I was heavy on like fire McDermott, this is never happening. his limitations are clear, but you could keep Brandon Beane. I felt that way then. It's just weird how it's switched, because the last 2 seasons I've felt like the roster hasn't been put together in a way that you could expect someone to compete, yet Sean has gotten them to the AFC Championship, to Denver, where, if we don't have maybe one of our worst offensive games where we're turning the ball over 5 times, we win that game, like, truly. So to me, I find it weird that I've been like in this position of like almost defending Sean McDermott, because in everything that I've been saying, it's like, I am totally okay that he got fired. Like, I really am. Like, I love him. I think he did so much to change everything, and like deserves respect and love. I hold a great amount of respect and love for what he did here. But a lot of me felt like, for since 13 seconds, that like his limitations were clear. But I just don't know how Brandon Beane gets the job and keeps the job and gets promoted and gets to this position now where he's the most powerful man in the building outside of Terry.
Yeah.
Which is what scares me, because I grew up with a Russ Brandon who was unfireable, basically. But you're like, what you said is correct, because it's like Terry was just constantly contradicting himself, where like he's blaming Sean for the roster, but then he's praising Beane for getting the most out of practice squad players. And it's like, dude, that's the opposite. You're flipping it around. Like, that's exactly how we feel right now, and why a lot of us feel like Sean was the wrong man to get fired maybe at this point, because exactly what you said, Sean's getting the most out of these dudes who are fringe NFL players, some of them.
Yeah.
And Beane's the one putting the teams together that are forcing this. And there's obviously unfortunate injuries and whatever might happen, but yeah, it's confusing. It was a lot of contradicting. It was a lot of just feeling like they were trying to scapegoat something or protect themselves from, obviously, I'm sure they saw the backlash the past few days on social media. So a lot of protecting and trying to defend and all that type of stuff.
The next, you get into those conversations, and, it goes back to, I guess, Terry's thoughts of just why he felt like moving on from McDermott's right decision, of just being like, I don't, and he said, this goes back to like Terry just being honestly blunt, which I appreciated, which was, he said, I don't feel Sean McDermott was going to be the guy that got us over the hump. He's like, we were trying to achieve something.
I think a lot of the problem was they just kept overly trying to explain and defend. Mm-hmm. And it should have just been, this is how we feel.
Yeah.
This is our plan.
It's okay to come out and say, which they did. It's because Brandon Beane talked about, which we'll get into. We're going to talk about wide receivers here in a second, because that's going to open up the can of worms on this one. But Brandon Beane talked about what his priorities are in just terms of like when it comes to like the wide receiver room and Josh Allen. It's like, well, my first thing is I want to protect Josh Allen. I want to keep him safe, because obviously we saw this year that man took a beating, and he might, Beane wouldn't tell us necessarily what is or is not going to be done, but, he might have to have something done on that foot, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be anything that keeps him out of practicing in the spring when OTAs come. So good news there for the quarterback in this situation, but it's okay to admit that, like, hey, Josh Allen is the face of his franchise. Everything has to run through him. And I think that's when we start talking about the head coaches. I have some things that I want to bring up with that, just about like why Josh Allen should be involved. And per Terry Pagula, he is going to be involved in that situation, because he's the face of the franchise, and you got to find a way to keep him happy and satisfied, and also help him achieve the ultimate goal of winning a Super Bowl, which is what everybody wants. Now, that being said, go back to the tail on the roster, Bill. And one of the first things he was asked about was wide receiver. But of course, it asked with the question, I think it came from Matt Perino, asked about, do you regret the way things were handled? And looking back with hindsight being 2020 here, the way that you handled that WGR 550 call with Jeremy and Joe. Beane says, yeah, maybe things could have been different in the way things I portrayed and the ways I said things. But he's like, I don't not regret defending my guys. He's like, I felt like in that instance, my wide receivers were taking a lot of flack. I felt like I had to stand against a post and defend them. Okay. The next question comes in on the presser, Bill. And it's, I believe, Sal Marana from the Democrat and Chronicle in Rochester. He is about to ask, a question along the lines. I'm going to paraphrase here. Brandon, a lot of people are skeptical about your ability to evaluate wide receiver talent, whether that's through the draft or free agency. And when it comes to the draft, Keon Coleman. And as he says Keon Coleman, he wraps up the question. Bean's about to answer. Objection. Boom. Terry Pagula off the top rope. Comes in out of nowhere. I'm going to interject. I'm going to talk about Keon. Okay.
He did the Kanye West, Taylor Swift.
He did.
I'm going to let you finish.
But
Keon Coleman was drafted by Sean McDermott.
what an unbelievable that was. And I want everybody to know that I truly, it's like I said in the beginning, I don't think this press conference was as tumultuous as it could have been, or as people probably thought it was. It was going to get tumultuous if Brandon Beane wanted it to get tumultuous. If he wanted to take the WGR 550 tone, yes, then things could have gotten dicey, and the reporters would have started throwing verbal haymakers, so to speak, here. But it was really tame, and I thought Beane did a really good job. But Terry Pagula coming out and basically just point blank admitting, without saying the words, Bill, Brandon Beane didn't want Keon Coleman. That was on the coaching staff. And it's not just McDermott. The guy who probably made that decision, Bill, got a head coaching interview with the team today. That ultimately probably came down to Joe Brady, Adam Henry, the wide receiver coach, but that's obviously going to fall on them too. When Terry Pagula blames the coaching staff, Beane later on in the press conference, just to clarify, did go back and say, hey, listen, I'm the general manager. That pick falls on me because I am the one who submits the slip. But then Terry Pagula, though, before this, he's just saying, I want people to know Brandon's been taking a lot of flack.
I'm not going to say it, but I will.
I'm going to stand up. I'm going to stand on business for my boy and say he didn't pick that dude from Florida State.
Wow, that was the coaching staff. While he is on the team. Dude. My mouth dropped because I was like folding towels, like setting up for the day. And I was like, did he just say that? And like, obviously none of us are pleased with Keon Coleman at this point, but dude, he's on your roster. He's only in his second year of a 4-year rookie deal. Like,
that is a player on the roster, as they famously have said.
And I saw some people online who are like, F his feelings. He's a grown man. Like, it's like, dude, this is a bad look for players in general that are seeing an owner talk about his players that way. A rostered player, and you're talking about him that way, that will not sit well with a free agent, a rookie, anyone. Even the dudes in his locker room, they probably are frustrated with Keon, but they love Keon. They're his teammates. They've all stood up for him and spoken for him. And you don't want to hear that and see that from the guy who cuts your check and owns the team. And
yeah. And as somebody who was in that room, I can tell to those who are listening and watching this, that was the moment. I think a lot of us were I had a little bit on my face, a little bit. I mean, I was working the cutaway camera on the side. And I think a lot of people in that room were like, oh my God, did he just say that? Because, but the problem is that wasn't supposed to be a story. Like, the thing with the wide receiver stuff is that, of course, Beane was going to get asked about this, Bill, because that's a point of criticism. That room did not live up to any sort of expectation, didn't come close to expectations. And Keon Coleman does deserve his fair share of criticism. Brandon Beane went back and said it was never about his on-field performance we were upset about. It was his off-field performance with his maturity issues, missing meetings. Eric Wood on Twitter saying, it's hard to miss that many meetings in the NFL. Yeah, that's a problem. So it's fair to get up there and ask that question, but man, Terry just elevated that to another level where, I mean, you heard it. Beane was having to kind of retract.
Oh yeah, he was definitely in damage control.
Yeah, absolute great word. Thank you. I don't know why I couldn't think of that one, but yes, absolute damage control on that one. That was, for those who weren't in the room and for those who are listening, watching, that was the moment where that's the most memorable moment, because out of all this now, the headline that comes out of this was Buffalo Bills wide receiver Keon Coleman was never Beane's pick, something of that nature. That was not supposed to be a headline. The Buffalo Bills did not think that was going to be a headline. Maybe somewhere in the Buffalo News 4 days from now, there's a subtitle of wide receiver room continues to be area of struggle, Keon Coleman at the forefront of conversation. 4 days later, Bill, but not on the first day, we've heard from Terry Pagula in person since 2019, his first media scrum since 2020. After you fired your head coach of 9 years, who is your second winningest head coach after snapping a 17-year playoff drought, after you lost in heartbreaking fashion again in the playoffs to a team that you beat last year, it's just all these things, and you're like, man, Keon Coleman was a storyline. One of my favorite memes, dude, or just like videos on the internet is the 50 Cent, like, hey, yo, he said 50. Why'd he say 550 for? Like that. Yeah. Somebody was like Keon Coleman on vacation in Cancun today. And it's so true. That one, like to your point, because you're probably, you're sitting there, you said you're full of towels. I would have accidentally stuck them back in the wash because I would have gotten so distracted with being like,
I was like, no way.
That just happened. And absolutely crazy there too. So then you go down, and I'm, for reference for those who are looking or watching this right now, I'm going down the list of like topics that we have in time chronological order, just so I can try to organize our thoughts here. But as we get past the Keon stuff, the wide receiver stuff continues to be just something that's talked about, and Bean addresses it, saying that, I believed in these guys and just ultimately weren't able to get the job done, whatever it may be. But you get back to a little bit of that talk we were saying earlier, like, what does this look like with president of football operations? Like, what does this new title mean? Just, means in theory, Brandon Bean's going to have more autonomy. But as he said, it's still going to be a very collaborative effort with him and Terry and whoever the head coach is and his front office staff. Then the question becomes about the search, because there are candidates. There are 6 candidates, as we know right now. Joe Brady, as we said, got his interview. Lou Anarumo and Brian Daboll are reportedly interviewing tomorrow. Anthony Lynn and Anthony Weaver are also candidates that will be interviewed, as is Grant Udinsky, the offensive coordinator from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Says, okay, we're going to have an open and full interview. So it's not just like Joe Brady's a shoe-in for an elevation. It's an open and full search. Those are just the first initial front-runner candidates. We get to this point, Bill. Let's dive into the coaching stuff since we're on it. Right now, how do you feel about those candidates? Is there still a name out there that you like, or names out there that you like that maybe the Bills haven't looked at or they can't look at because of the playoffs? What's your early just thoughts on what you would want in a head coach?
I feel like I'm at Clint Kubiak or bust. Like, that is like the one guy I want. Fair. So we'll see how these weekends shake out. Out of that list, I mean, it's obviously like Daboll is probably the most enticing name, just because we know what he was able to do. Josh, I just struggle with, and it's tough because like Sean was such a obviously players coach, like they loved him.
Mm-hmm. Clearly, and in case anybody doesn't know that now, go look at the way players reacted.
And he's very professional, and sometimes I wondered if there was like a lack of like in your face or like pushing. I'm not pushing, but like, I guess I don't know the right word, but someone who's like a little more forceful. Like, when I think of like Brian Flores, because I actually do like Brian Flores a lot too. And I know he's not on that list, but I'm very into Brian Flores. I think he's a good coach, but he's a very intense guy. And Daboll is like that, but I also feel like he's kind of immature. And I don't know if he's got that head coaching tendency. Like, he throws his players under the bus pretty openly. He like is going at them in front of the camera, like just stuff that like you can do that, but it's behind closed doors and it's in a professional manner, because these guys are paid grown adults. Like, you don't yell at them like children. And I don't like kind of how he goes. I just don't like the way he almost like feels like he's protecting himself by actively saying something in like a press conference that like you shouldn't say. Sure. So that part as a head coach kind of throws me off with Daboll, where I'm like, I don't know if I want him. Also, like, I guess there's some controversy with how he handled Jackson Dart's head injuries and all that stuff. And
makes you wonder.
It makes me wonder. Like, he's obviously like, I would love him, I think, as an OC if he fit with like whoever we do bring in, or I think whoever we do hire, though, I don't know if this is, I'm trying to think of all the names we just said. I think it has to be an offensive guy. I don't think you can fire Sean McDermott and go for a defensive guy because that was a dude who knew defense and had it figured out. Obviously, defensive line definitely was the low point, but like what he did in the second half of that Broncos game was incredible. Like the adjustments they made to like really just stop them.
Like they've done before this year. You know, we saw the same thing. So, I think that's why it looks like Lou Anarumo and Anthony Weaver. I like the thought of Anarumo, but it's just also like, to your point, I feel like you got to go get an offensive-minded head coach.
This move has to be like, you're making the move to now unlock Josh Allen like completely.
It has to be a home run. It has to be a home run.
It has to like lean into everything that makes Josh a freak and like run with it.
And so I get to this point with my thoughts. I am Team Daboll. And in a perfect world, you are able to get Davis Webb as your offensive coordinator. And I know everybody I tweeted this earlier, and on defense, you figure it out. All right, find somebody. Retain Babbage. Find somebody. I don't care. Figure it out. Because my thought is, if you can unlock, to your point, Bill, which I agree with, you find a way to unlock Josh Allen and put him back grooving in the way he was with Daboll in his best statistical years as a
400-yard games.
You find a way. Okay, the Bills want to give up 31. Cool, dude. We'll put up 38. Have a day. See ya. Obviously, they're going to need to find some talent around, right? It just can't be James Cook and Josh. They're going to need a little bit more than Curtis Samuel and Joshua Palmer, Khalil Shakir, Tyrell Shavers, McCole Hardman, right? They're going to need a little bit more than that. But the reason, and I was taking some praise and some flack for this tweet because this is what I said this morning was my ideal. I think that the Bills would win back some grace from the fan base if they got Brian Daboll as a head coach, Davis Webb as an offensive coordinator. Davis Webb's getting head coach looks. He might not be available. There's a world where Davis Webb's the head coach and Brian Daboll's the offensive coordinator. But the reason I go to those two, Bill, and it goes to a point that I think you and I both pretty much see eye to eye on with Josh, you want to make your franchise quarterback, Josh Allen, very happy. Why did Matt Barkley get to spend so many years in Buffalo? Why did Shane Buechele get to come back after doing that brief stint in Kansas City and come back here? Because those guys are friends with Josh Allen. Josh Allen's happiness is very important inside that room. Yeah. Terry Pagula noted in the press conference today that although his input will be kept private between Terry and Brandon and the front office staff as they look for a head coach, his input will be heard and it will be valuable. Josh Allen was not involved in any decision to fire Sean McDermott, to make that clear. He also was not informed of that decision with any exceedingly, early timetable. Like he was told pretty much almost as close to when
I heard a rumor. I won't name any sources. I heard a rumor that he found out from his ESPN notification as it happened.
Ooh. Well, I'll tell you what. That's how every other player. That was a question. I think Ian Mills had asked that question to Brandon Beane was, did you meet with them Sunday during the player exit interviews and do you tell him that? And he goes, no, we didn't have the decision. Terry made the decision Sunday night. And because he didn't premeditate on it. He said he made it ultimately in his head right after the Broncos game, but didn't make it official until after. So everybody found out the same way we did. But I go back to the point about Daboll and Davis Webb. So let's just take that one. Head coach, Daboll, offensive coordinator, Davis Webb. There's a world, Bill, in 2030 when Joshua Allen contract comes up, and if he looks at this organization and they have not won a Super Bowl, or maybe they've gotten one, but he's looking to maybe spread his wings and go somewhere else. Maybe he wants to go play in Santa Clara for the team he grew up loving and watching. Maybe the Brock Purdy experiment doesn't work in San Francisco anymore. Maybe he wants to return to the state of California, be the reliever behind Matthew Stafford when he eventually retires and the backup behind him doesn't work, and go to the Rams. Maybe the Herbert experiment doesn't work out in LA and they trade him. And they said, hey, Josh, come home, play in a dome, play in SoFi. His superstar, global rock star wife lives in LA. I'm just saying that if you want to make Josh Allen happy and try to ensure that he does remain a Bill years down the line, where you can have him as your franchise quarterback till the day he retires, which I think 99.999% of Bills fans would probably want, make Josh Allen happy and put the guys around him that are going to make him enjoy football So we don't have to listen to a Joe Burrow-esque type press conference from him where he all of a sudden he's losing the love for the game that he talks so highly about and how you have to be a sicko and something twisted in you to love this game this much. I don't want to see that happen for Josh Allen, this organization. So my thought is you bring in somebody around him where this guy can just be Josh and he can be the most, as you're like, to your point, the most unfiltered, just Uncle Rico. I'm going to throw this ball over the mountains. I'm going to find a way to just run up the score on people. Find a way to turn him into the juggernaut that I think every Bills fan, when they play Madden, is with Josh Allen as your quarterback. I think that's important. And that's why there are a lot of other names, Bill, to your point, like Clint Kubiak, I think would be a very, very good hire. But Clint Kubiak might not be able to get interviewed formally anywhere until after the Super Bowl because the Seahawks are probably going to win it. Davis Webb can't even get interviewed until the Broncos eventually lose. And they might pull off this upset and beat the Patriots with Jarrett Stidham. Who knows? There are certain candidates they can't get to.
How insane is it that Sam Darnold might be the quarterback to win the first quarterback to win the Super Bowl out of that draft class?
Or the Patriots burnt, rebuilt, and then the first year of Mike Vrabel, then won. Yeah, so I didn't mean to pour salt in the wound. There are some nasty. Honestly, Bills fans are probably praying the Rams or the Broncos do this.
Oh yeah, I'm NFC over everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Seahawks would obviously be the Seahawks are so good. I know this is not a Seahawks podcast. Holy crap, that team they're a wagon, dude. That's why Kubiak is, Mike McDonald was such a sought after candidate, and that's why Kubiak is one of the top head coaching candidates. But that's where my head is at in terms of just why I believe Daboll and Davis Webb are there. You could throw, man, I don't know, like see if Jim Schwartz is going to leave Cleveland. Maybe people have brought Jim Schwartz's name.
Oh, as the coordinator.
Yes. It's like your D coordinator, like there's familiarity there, a little bit of success, right? Like, I don't know. I'm not really bent out of shape about who the defensive coordinator is. I just want who's going to unlock the best version of Josh Allen because you got to keep your franchise quarterback happy.
No, it's a really good point, actually. And like those two, I mean, Daboll has proven to know Josh and know what kind of makes him tick and get him going. And I feel like really like leaned into Josh where, when he left, we were getting into I can't remember the exact word he used, but it was like calm, neutral or calm, whatever he was saying. Do you remember that? He had like words that it's like, I don't want to hear that.
Yeah. It was basically, and like for the kids listening now, basically he was talking about they just wanted Josh Allen to achieve flow state, essentially. Yes. Where he wanted to. They just want him to just have like flow state aura,
So I felt like Daboll definitely brings out the really aggressive competitor version of him, which I like.
Davis
and
Webb.
Maybe Daboll's learned. Maybe Daboll's learned from his. Maybe he looks back and says, maybe I could have handled this better and gets better with the whole blaming players and all that stuff publicly. I wouldn't be opposed to it at all. I think that's a good play too. I really do like Clint Kubiak though, but like you said, who knows when we can get to talk to him.
Yeah.
But I actually had this talk today at the barbershop and it's a sad talk and it's one I don't like thinking of, but I said pretty much what you said where, maybe Josh eventually, looks at this team 4 years down the line, haven't won and wants to go home and all that stuff. And dude, I was saying to my client, I hate thinking like this, but like, I wouldn't even be mad if we haven't won a Super Bowl and his contract's up and he wants to go to the Rams and team up with McVay. Like it'll be very much Lions, Matt Stafford situation.
Very much
like you're happy for him. He deserves like if you love something, you got to set him free. And we'll go back to our little pits of misery that we've had this nice little vacation from, but I hope it doesn't come to that, but that's a true thing where that's like, dude, if he's 34 and this roster is not, and we haven't won it yet, and this roster is not doing what it's supposed to do, he deserves to get a shot. He deserves a ring, and I don't root for him if he left.
I mean, look at Peyton, right? Like I like a lot of people compare the arc of careers right now with Josh and Peyton Manning being so similar. it took Payne until he was 30, and then he ended up leaving too. And then got another one in Denver, but at least he got one with the team, that drafted him. And I think that goes back to a lot of where I appreciated Terry Pegula's very blunt honesty about why he had to relieve McDermott, is because I think he sees it the way we do, Bill. I think he sees it man, I cannot let this chapter of Buffalo Bills football, while Josh Allen is my quarterback, be defined by, man, you had an exceptional talent, and oh man, you were so close, but we were never able to get it done. Because people will look back on it. I know the 4 Super Bowls, while an incredible feat, are an outside perception outside of Western New York. A lot of people make fun of the Bills for that failure to this day. I couldn't even begin to describe what the outside narrative would be like if they actually, no, you know what? I do. But that narrative of if Buffalo can't get it done with Josh Allen, I know that narrative's real quick, this is a Bills podcast, but I'm an Angels fan. Mike Trout, boom, done. Guy's had one playoff his entire time. That's it. That's you're wasting talent. Mike Trout is going to play one playoff series his entire life, and it happened in 2014. They got swept in the first round by the Kansas City Royals as the number 1 team in baseball. That's it. He played 3 games. He played terrible. That's it. Bye-bye. See you later. And I feel bad for Mike Trout. I wanted the Angels to trade Mike Trout so bad, but they be in cap hell. Or what? I don't even know how that works because there's no salary cap. But they just won't. Because whatever. But that's a comparison. That's actually the perfect comparison. And selfishly, as somebody who just likes football, I think, to your point, he'd be owed that opportunity if it ever came to that. But I think Bills fans are really hoping that you're so close and you just have to make 1 or 2 tweaks. Look at all those stats, Bill, of the John Fox scenario, the when Gruden, who came in and replaced him, and then Gruden, when Gruden took over in Tampa Bay in 2003, and he went and won a Super Bowl with them, right? It's possible. I'm not saying that whoever they bring in is going to come in and have an immediate Super Bowl run, but it's a good chance they could, because you have Josh Allen and the expectations are still high, and you've got a good enough roster where you can probably go sneak your way back in the playoffs and see what happens there. So that's where I'm at, just with the coaching search, of just why I feel it's important to keep in mind that while you want the right fit, I think it has to be offensive minded. And I think they have to be somebody who Josh Allen is going to get the best version of himself out of. Yeah. Anywho, back to the press conference. I'm back to my notes now. Terry was asked, why is Terry Pegula answering questions today? And it's taking him so long to do that. Terry Pegula, just real quick caveat here. Terry Pegula says, life's been busy. Kim's health struggles that everybody knows about. Says he hasn't been able to watch Jessie, the number 3 women's tennis player in the world. He said I think he's been to 2 of her matches. So if people were wondering oh, hey, why, did this all happen? That's why too. Jay Scursy from the Buffalo News, real quick. This goes back to Josh because I'd see him next to a question about Josh. Jay Scursky reported not too long ago, before we got on air, that a source close to Josh had said that he is, quote, very on board with the leadership, values his time with Sean McDermott, appreciates everything he did, but is on board with Brandon Beane and Terry Pegula and the front office management staff as they move forward. Just real quick caveat, because we haven't heard from Josh. We normally hear from him the day of locker room cleanout, but we didn't this week, and it sounds like we aren't going to hear from him. I couldn't even tell you a guess at when at that point we're going to hear from him. So then we get to the next big fiery moment, I think, of this press conference, Brandon Beane getting asked about his character. So Joe Biscaglia rightfully asked him about the power play. Hey, the rumor, speculation, Brandon, there is a power play within this organization. Back to what you were talking about at the very beginning, Bill, about why did Sean McDermott fall on the sword for problems that also span into your sector of the Bills, the roster that you built. Brandon Beane got, I would say, pretty grounded in his conversation, a little emotional. I was there with my camera, could zoom right in on his face, and there were, tear ducts were starting to get a little red, and his face was beet red, and he was passionately defending his character there. Just from your perspective, Bill, how much of that did you buy? Did you feel like that was being sincere about him saying that there really isn't a problem with him and McDermott's relationship?
I'm I don't really buy it. I think that it's pretty well documented that there was like some rifts, and you could tell towards the end of the season that McDermott was taking, shots at the way the roster was kind of constructed. So there's definitely something there. It's just also tough when he kind of is, and I get it, it's human nature to defend yourself, and everyone's got their side of the story, and it's through their point of view, and you see it your way. But he's kind of revisionist history, revising history with the whole WGR thing, when you can pull up receipts, and I mean, they have the whole embedded, I think, doc where he's like gleefully on YouTube watching like the people talking about how he dunked on Jeremy and Joe, and he was on Pat McAfee's show kind of gloating about. So it's like, he's sitting there saying, I'm just I'm a passionate guy and I never meant to do that. And it's like, I don't know, man. I've seen it. I've seen a lot of people clip it today after that and kind of put it back on the timeline, and you're kind of like, all right, dude. But I get it. You're trying to save face, and you want, and it is tough. It is human nature to defend yourself. So who knows, if I'm in that position, maybe I'd do the same. You see things differently through your own point of view, but I don't know. I think he comes off a little phony, just to me.
I think it's a very fair thought process and opinion to have in terms of just how people felt and how Bills fans felt about those remarks, because that was obviously a big thing. That was people want answers on why this relationship, and we've bounced around the questions a little bit, but one of the earlier topics about this, was asked. It was a question to, I think, Terry or Brandon about just why did this relationship dissolve? And they both were like, this relationship never dissolved. We were always in constant communication. I don't really know how much of that I buy, because I feel like you don't hear the speculation, the reports, everything got the Ty Dunn article that came out. I don't feel like you hear about a lot of that if everything is all good and whatever. Terry also, again, another bluntly honest moment was, he's like, hey, sometimes we do get we don't see eye to eye on things. He's like, I've told this guy to F off once or twice, which I thought that was a funny moment, a little funny moment of levity, where I think Terry saved himself with some levity in there in that situation. That got a couple of chuckles around the room there too. I will say, when Bean brought up the fact, he's like, because everybody remembers a couple of years ago, the Ty Dunn article about Sean McDermott at training camp and the multiple players that had come forth and were sources in this. And Bean did, which he reminded us that he did come up there and pound the podium to be like, hey, I'm in defense of this guy, gave him a game ball when they went back and beat Kansas City the following week. There's an element to that I believe to be genuine. And then I also believe there's also moments of that you're the general manager. Those are just things you do.
Yeah. Right.
I think he is more than capable of doing that, but also kind of making sure that his best interests are still aligned in a sense.
Yeah,
I think it can be played both ways. But in that moment, today, I felt like Bean was about as sincere as you could have been in that situation. I don't think everybody fully had the blinders on, but I think that was about as sincere as things were getting there too. Just more so the rest of these conversations just about the relationship and why it dissolved, and nobody said. Another Keon follow-up here or on the power structure. Terry was asked, Terry, there's basically $850 million in taxpayer money. We haven't talked to you in 5 years, 6 years in person, 7 years, actually, it was 2019. So 6 years over Zoom, 7 years in person. Do you plan on being more accessible? Terry Pegula simply said, I will try to be. So maybe we get Terry Pegula once or twice. And there were a couple Sabres fans, and I do know, I think Mike Carrington from the Buffalo News tweeted this out too, that, they introduced Jarmo Kekalainen as a new general manager a couple weeks ago, and Terry just said, we're happy to be here. We're, really confident in our hire of Jarmo Kekalainen. Here's our new GM, Jarmo Kekalainen, and then passed the mic over and then walked off. So I can understand some Sabre fans were
salty,
a little salty in there too. Oh, wait a minute. Speaking of the Sabres, Bill, we got to talk about the power play. So I missed this complete moment because I was so focused on Bean's reaction. The journalist in me was focused on the true newsworthy side of this, but the interesting entertainment factor was Terry Pagula coming out and saying, I'm not a fan of power plays. If I thought Brandon Beane was on a power play, he wouldn't be here. I don't do power plays. And of course, I should have known because I wasn't able to check my phone as frequently. That one, all timer. Like
you walked right into that.
The second the Sabres go 0-for-5 in the power play, clip. That's going all over Twitter.
Yeah, he set himself up with that one.
Is there another big moment, Bill, from that we're missing? You feel like was something that we needed to bring up? I thought we hit on the big talking points. I mean, it's a 54-minute long press conference. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else we haven't really touched on. Touched on the candidates, the kind of the big talking points. Anything else?
No, I think that was pretty much it. There's just the big things I think about. I think we pretty much covered with like Keon and just Terry interjecting every now and then was just.
if I could just get in here. But
have you ever watched the show Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt?
I know like the premise of it. It's on TBS. Was it a TBS show?
It was a Netflix original. It's probably like 11 years old now.
Yeah, so maybe I might be thinking of a different show then.
Basically, the main girl, Kimmy Schmidt, was abducted by like a cult leader and was like forced into this underground bunker because he said the world was ending. So she was stuck there for like 10, 15 years and she gets rescued. And now she's like in society, but she hasn't been in society since she was like 15 and she has no idea how to do stuff.
Yeah.
So she meets this like really rich family that she's like being a nanny for, and the wife, who's like a gold digger, like sets her up on a date with this guy, and she's all excited because it's like her first date since like high school. She's been abducted in this bunker for so long. And she gets to the dinner and it's like this really rich, like 95-year-old guy who's just like has no idea, probably riddled with Alzheimer's or something. And like throughout the whole date, he's just like blurting out like random things that make no sense. And like that's like where as I'm watching like Brandon Beane trying to answer a question and Terry Pagula is just wait a second and just goes. And I was like, this is exactly like when Kimmy Schmidt was on the date with the old rich guy.
one of the other best interjections too was like I think it was a question about like the game itself and just like like
that's what.
Yeah. Do you think your result would have changed? Like, I think Brandon was asked, like,
I said, like, what did the game come? What if you felt the roster was good enough?
Yes.
Why did you like?
You feel like the roster was going to win that game, and then Terry goes, "It was a catch.
It was a bad call.
Bad call. Whatever it was." Yeah. Yeah. That was another moment. But again, like I know the Keon stuff was not Terry's brightest moment, but it goes back to I do think like just like the upfront honesty was a little bit refreshing. Like that's a little bit more from that. I'm be more than happy to be at more Terry Pagula press conferences. I think he'll probably only get better as he keeps going. I think in that Keon stuff, he really wanted to make sure. I mean, he made it very known, Bill, and because you listened to it, he said it 100 times. Like the decision to fire McDermott was his and his alone. Said it 100 times, so there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But I felt like he also just really needed to keep going to bat for his general manager, and I think that was a moment where he probably is just better letting Brandon deal with the fallout of his, like, well, even if it wasn't his decision, but like ultimately his decision to send the slip in and pick Keon Coleman, right? Like, I think that is a moment Terry probably, the PR staff will probably be like, hey, Terry, next time, just let Brandon answer that one.
I feel like a lot of the bad moments could have just been solved by being like vague and just
the corporate jargon. But you know what? We didn't get that from Terry.
I feel like you're that meme where it's like, if Terry Pagula press conferences have 10 fans, I am one of them. Terry Pagula press conferences have one fan, it is Dom.
Yeah.
If Terry Pagula press conferences have no fans, Dom is dead.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't dude, I have the funniest like random story I have about Terry Pagula. I think it was my second or third day working in Buffalo. Like I had just moved here, kid moved up from Florida, back in the state of New York, 2 hours from home. And I'm going to, I believe it was Sabres development camp at the Harbor Center. And in the parking lot or the parking garage of the Harbor Center is attached to elevators. They'll take you straight up to the 7th floor where the observation room is and the bleachers are for the rink. Get in the elevator. I go up on the 3rd floor. I stop at the 4th floor. We have to get somebody. Or no, I'm sorry. There's somebody on the elevator. I hop in. He has his head down. I go, hey, excuse me, sir. Can you press floor 7, please? He goes, yep, that's where I'm going. I go, cool. And I look up. He looks up. It was Terry Pagula. And I forgot that like I'm in a Channel 7 jacket, I'm working, and I just go, what's up, Terry? I go, oh, my bad. I'm sorry, Terry Pagula, Mr. Pagula, Terry. I'm Dom. I'm new reporter for Channel 7. Nice to meet you. And I will say Terry talked to me for he talked to me for 5 minutes outside the elevator, just minuscule stuff. But that was a funny interaction. But it's crazy though, is I had more face-to-face interaction with Terry Pagula that I found out than the entire Buffalo sports beat did in the last 7 years. Crazy, So yeah, more of that, less of the Bills losing in heartbreaking fashion. Bill, we just go over the game. Let's start. Was it a catch? Do you think it was a catch?
Oh man, I'm weirdly torn on this, and obviously you slow it down, you see the still frames, and it looks blatantly like a catch. He's got it. He's the only one with hands on it. I think the thing that made them call it a non-catch is the fact that there was not even a wrestle or a tug or a movement to take the ball away.
Cook didn't sell it.
It just was out of his hand. And it makes me question if that defender wasn't on top of him, was that ball just going to fly out of his hands? How McCole Hardman kind of did a couple plays before where he had it hit the ground and it just shot out of him. And I want to say it was a catch. I think when you look at it from a lot of angles, it looks like a catch. And I think it very well could have been called a catch because we've seen it the next day and all the time we see this.
Yeah.
But I do see the little bit of leeway that Brandon Cooks kind of allowed, because there was no, I don't know. I feel even if we saw him have to wrestle it from Brandon Cooks, there's a good chance we get that review.
Yeah.
And they flip it. I still want to say it was a catch, but I feel that's when I'm trying to be non-biased and I look at it, I think that's what causes it to not for that. I get where they see it maybe. But
yeah, to me, and Howard Simon best explained this the other night on Leading the Charge. Common sense, it's a catch. NFL rules, it's not a catch. I initially started to think, because I really didn't think, to your point, I didn't think Cook sold it enough. I don't know if he ever had possession. It looked like McMillan had some sort of possession on it. There was that one camera angle shot towards the face of Brandon Cooks from the ground that kind of gave a pretty good indication that maybe he had it. I just thought he needed to have better, just a better sell of I had this ball, I came down with it. Also, McCole Hardman had a bad throw from Josh Allen the play before on a 15-yard out that he dropped. But bad throw from Josh, McCole could still make that play, go make a play for your quarterback in this situation. Bill, I was ready to be it wasn't a catch. We just move on. It's the Bills, like you said in the beginning of the show. They're cursed, whatever. It's just heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak because, God gives his biggest test to his toughest soldiers. And at this point, Bills Mafia is just a bunch of gladiators. It must be.
Right.
But then Sunday night, Bill, Devontae Adams did the same exact thing, dude. He did the same thing. And then I literally did the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood meme. I was just lounging back like this. And then I literally just went, I'm sorry. What is it? And then, as you saw, because I think you tweeted about it too, Twitter blew up, rightfully. Bills Mafia went berserk. It was, I just don't know what a catch is anymore. It probably wasn't, Bill, but I just don't know what a catch is anymore. And it just, I was really hoping to cover a Super Bowl, at some point over the last 4 years. And it doesn't look like this year is going to be it. And It is what it is.
I think the toughest part for me is like we look at that and we like harp on it because it's the easiest thing. But like, dude, we had so many chances. Like we threw that game away.
If Josh does not fumble before halftime, he takes a knee. Prater sends you to the AFC Championship game.
Yeah, dude. Even right before overtime, and you got Knox 4 yards short of the 4 yards 4 yards short of the end zone, and you freaking. I know it's like the pocket's not clean, all that stuff. But like,
neither was the streak, but
that's the game right there. And I truly think this too. Had James Cook not fumbled, we were gonna boat race them. Like I think that was gonna on track to be a blowout.
Huge momentum swing. They were about to go up 14-3. Offense was humming. Joe Brady made his head coaching. God forbid a white offensive coordinator get a little motion. God forbid a white coordinator get a little motion. Joe Brady was calling a good game, and it was starting to work. I agree. I think the James Cook fumble was a massive momentum swing. Josh's fumble at halftime cost them. And it goes back to like, and that's another reason too, not to jump back to the point about the head coach thing. That's why I don't need somebody to be, it's also the point of you said about you don't need somebody to be a serious, like, don't tell these grown men who make millions of dollars how to live their lives and like tell them how to be adults. I don't think you need a coach that like tells Josh Allen, like, hey, bud, that wasn't good enough. I need you to be here. I do think you need somebody to put him in the right direction. Like when he's just like the road runner. And sometimes when the road runner gets off the road, just like twist him real quick and just get him right on the right path again. That's why I think Josh was so heartbroken, is just because like, I think he knew that
it sucks.
That game was, a lot of that was on him and his mistakes.
Yeah. You look at his stats in the playoffs and it's damn near perfect, honestly.
And then he has
this game, and it's like, dude, what are you accomplishing by running there? Like, even what? You get 12 yards, you get tackled, you have no timeouts.
Yeah.
The clock is like, there's nothing that comes out of that. I just don't. Oh man,
it's frustrating.
So bad.
It's frustrating. And all of this too, but I mean, it was already going to be an interesting offseason, but now the McDermott being fired news, and then the head coaching search, how Bean is going to, as Terry phrased it, Houdini this roster into being something that is a force of a weapon that can compete in the AFC, knowing that you're probably going to get the Chiefs are going to reload, the Bengals will reload, the Ravens will get a new head coach, but they still have Lamar. Like I think that's what's frustrating. You look back and you're like, that's where I think Bean has some of that blame he needs to shoulder, is because
we're in a bad cap spot.
It's the window.
We don't have game changers. We have two.
Yeah.
We have some solid pieces, but like our money's tied up in a lot of dudes who don't deserve to be making the money that they're making, like bluntly.
Yeah.
I don't like doing that because I love the players, but
it's tough. It's gonna be a very busy offseason, one that'll bring a lot of intrigue for Buffalo sports fans out there. Guess what? Knock on wood, the Sabres might make the playoffs. I'm not going to say they are, but they might make the playoffs. So I guess,
what's really sad?
I'd like that forward to. What's that?
Really sad is like when I'm cutting some kid's hair today, I had like a 9-year-old. It's one of my good friend's son, the one who played Little Brother Bill, actually.
Little Bill.
Video. Little Bill, of course. And like, dude, it's just sad because he knows nothing else but like this roster. This coach, success, a totally different upbringing that I was raised in.
Oh,
like I was used to like a new quarterback, usually a couple throughout the season. You had Rob Johnson and Alex Van Pelt when I was 5. You had, or Doug Flutie, Rob Johnson 5, Alex Van Pelt, Rob Johnson 6, Bledsoe and Lostman and Holcomb. Like you were lucky to get 2 years of just Drew Bledsoe. I think we had.
Right.
And like, he's like, my dad said, Taron Johnson might not be here. Like, why would we do that? My dad said Dawson Knox maybe it won't be here. Like, why would we and I'm like, yeah, man, like this is kind of, they make money and he doesn't understand the cap. He doesn't get it, but he thinks this is like, just like what you have. I was I feel somewhat lucky to be born in such turmoil because
You started at
didn't expect
nothing.
that.
You started at nothing. You
Yeah.
know, like despair, know all about it,
That's
dude.
all I know. I said that to my friends today because they're like, I have a lot of friends who aren't Bills fans, so they're trying to like rage bait me. And I'm like, dude, this is familiarity.
Yeah, Ben here
Turmoil
done
of
that.
familiarity. This was just a nice little vacation I had these past 6 years.
I had I was telling this to my family because my mom and sister are big Bills fans, and I was telling them, and I remember last year, little inside for me is I was on my last year of my contract last year here at 7. I signed an extension for another year, but last year when they lost to Kansas City, I thought that was it. I thought I was probably leaving, getting a new job or whatever, and I really just won. Like they were a game away from the Super Bowl, and that's obviously any kid's dream if you're in my position to cover a Super Bowl. And I remember I actually like legitimately started like tearing up. Like as we were getting ready for the live shot, like Beauvais was cutting up some things. I was setting up the camera and I was like kind of watching the aftermath of the celebration wrap up. And I was like, that's really like, I was starting to get choked up and I like had to snap out of it to be on air. The game ended in Denver and like, I wasn't there. I was back here in Buffalo in the studio and I walked out of the studio and I think my mom was like, honey, are you okay? And I was like, sorry, you missed out again. I'll go, I 4 years of it, used to it. I don't know, just numb. I have not had a moment where I'm like, oh, really sad.
No,
like
this
I
year
just,
definitely.
I've just accepted it. It's just it felt like it was gonna be a lightning in the bottle ride anyways, and it just wasn't.
This year was the least sad I've been.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was numb and I was upset, but I was just like, yeah. That's really all it was. It was.
I don't want the podcast to end on like a really sad doom gloom note. You were bringing up your dad's conversation, dude. I got the funniest text from my father today during the middle of this press conference, Bill. And again, I can't check my phone all the time, but I'm just trying to like in between shooting cutaways, I'm like trying to fire off some tweets and I get a text from him at like 10:30 from my dad. Hey, dude, you see the Bills are interested in bringing Brian Daboll in as their head coach? I go, I did, Dad. I like called him later at night. And he like the first thing I was like, hey, what's up, dude? And he's like, hey, what's up? How was your day? How was the press conference? I go, good. We'll dive into it. He goes, yeah, did you get my text earlier? I go, I did, Dad. I was like, hey, Dad, get this too, dude. Joe Brady got an interview today. He goes, the offensive coordinator? How'd you know that? My dad's like, did you get the scoop? And I go, no. And I was like, the Bills.
Your dad's getting
yeah. I got to start telling my dad I'm Adam Schefter, basically.
Your dad's getting scoops from like pigeons and Tony
dude, he gets tricked on AI posts on Facebook. He asked me, he's like, dude, I heard the refs from the Bills game got fired. I don't think that was true, but I just want to make sure. I was like, where do you see that? He goes, it was a post of like the NFL on Facebook. I go, that's a fake account, Dad.
He's like, I saw the Broncos players carrying the refs off the field.
I actually saw that they actually replaced Bo Nix's ankle with a horse's hoof, so he'll be able to play all of a sudden.
Speaking of, though,
yeah.
I thought that was maybe my best video this season.
It was
true to
we gotta talk the video.
True to my theory, we lost. I didn't
even think if we talked about that theory. Shit. Sorry, Bill.
I should have beefed the video.
It was very good. I know that's what stinks amidst all this now because it's been 72 hours since all this started, if 96 almost since the game, and Bill had a banger of a video. He had to do it on short rest, Bill.
I spent Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday with my mom building the Trojan horse.
The Trojan horse, hell yeah! Which
was crazy. Came out really well. Actually, I'm keeping it. I have my baby cousin's second birthday is in a couple of weeks, and I'm gonna bust that bad boy out and put him in there and push him around.
Hell yeah. Uncle Bill, baby. Uncle Cousin Bill, whatever it is. Yeah. Dude, I was going to say earlier, that kid who you're cutting your client there, little Bill, who doesn't know anything else, just wait until he like reads the head coaching candidate list right now. He's like, Dad, who's Anthony Lynn? And you're going to be like, boy, can I tell you stories about Anthony Lynn? He's
Vietnam,
like, new guy. It's like, oh no, son, we have been there, done that. All right, Bill. This has been our longest episode. A good one though, lots to unpack. I think the next time, honestly, folks, we're going to come to you is probably after Bill and I, since they're done, this is sad. We probably won't be back here weekly. I don't imagine the Bills making this hire in the next week. So next time you'll hear from us is likely when the Bills make a head coaching hire. We'll pop back on for a reaction pod to that. I will say, though, I was looking at some stats, Bill. We have amassed on just purely downloads alone, I believe we are almost, we're at over 1,500 pure downloads. I still do not know how to look up streams on this software we upload the podcast to, because I know not everybody downloads podcasts, but great numbers for a podcast that started pretty quickly right before the start of the football season here. I'm super appreciative for all the people who have listened and watched. Bill, this has been super fun to do with you. We put in, hold on, let me look up the final stat. We have put in 20, this will be 21 episodes, you and I think. I think we have 24 total, not counting the couple guests I've brought on. So it'll be 21 in total from us. So frick yeah, dude, it's been fun. What a fun little ride. I wish I could have been doing a podcast from Santa Clara with you, but that wasn't in the cards.
Same. This has been fun. And I feel like I got a lot better. I think I was a little nervous at first, but I feel like we got to know each other well, which made it funner.
Yeah, that's it.
Became friendly
amidst all this. So I finally get to put a face to the guy whose videos I've watched for like 10 years and being like, oh yeah, he's just a normal dude. Like he's not this big celebrity who is full of himself. No, dude, he's just a modest barber who just makes funny content.
Maybe leading the charge is just the friends we made along the way.
That's a great way of putting it, Bill. All right, folks. Until next time, that is Brother Bill. I'm Dom Tibbetts. This is Leading the Charge, the podcast. Talk to you soon.